Hello, everyone. My name is Rahim Zaidi, and I'm the Managing Director of Leading Future. Welcome back to another session of our webinar series. Today, we have our two very special guests with us, and I'll introduce them in a second. Let me just give you a background of our session, what we will be discussing today. As everyone know, and is everyone aware of the current situation of that across the world, the coronavirus has affected many people, including international students. And specifically talking about international students across Australia have been facing an unprecedented challenge at this time. And for many, their Australian dream or study dream is becoming something very different. As the sector steps up to offer support in many different ways, big questions remain about the level of support that is available and how are we ensuring that the students are informed about those services. All this while international students face travel restrictions, housing issues, unemployment, and a growing pressure on their mental health and well-being. However, the resilience from the international students has been remarkable, with stories across the country showing how many are adopting during this time, and many of them supporting each other at different levels. It is absolutely amazing to see the sense of the community, the help within the students, and how they are supporting each other during this crisis. And now it's time to introduce our amazing guests. And first, I would like to introduce Deputy Lord Mayor Jessica Scully. Jess Scully is a curator, cultural strategist, a creative industry advocate who is passionate about cities and city making. From 2009 to 2017, Jess was the founding director of Vivid Ideas, Australia's largest creative industries event, and curated creative sector events including JunkNet, uh, TEDx Sydney curating participation. Jess was a founding member and contributor to the Sydney Culture Network, launched in late 2017. In 2016, Jess was elected as a councillor, and in 2019 was elected as Deputy Lord Mayor for the City of Sydney. Congratulations. And Jess is also an advocate for the knowledge economy, creative and cultural sector, and in encouraging participation in politics, creativity, and innovating our public realm. As a public art curator, her projects included Green Square Library, which I've personally seen. It's an amazing project. And she has also served as an arts policy advisor for the New South Wales Minister of Arts, directed the Qantas Spirit Youth Awards and Creative Cities East Asia project, and began her career as an editor of number of creative industries publications, including Yen, MT, and Hot Press. So that was a very, very brief sort of introduction to Jess. Thank you, Jess, for joining us today.
Wonderful to be here, Rahim. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And our second panelist is Mr. Devendra Singh. So Devendra Singh is a recent graduate from Monash University. He is a national representative for CAPA, which is basically Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations. He is also a regional advisor for Victorian Multicultural Commission. He has been a part of CAPA for second year in a row as an international officer. Prior to year 2020, he served CAPA as an international officer for the year of 2019. He has also held many positions at Monash Graduate Association, including that of international officer for the period of 2018 and 19. And he has also provided momentum to FAIR's and FAIR PTV campaign in the state of Victoria. Devendra's priorities include campaigning for public transport, uh, concession campaigns running through Victoria and New South Wales, increasing the engagement of regional universities with CAPA and creating awareness among students about the issues such as cheating and scamming and advocating for students' rights in Australia as well. So thank you, Devendra, for joining us for the session as well.
Thank you, Rahim, for inviting me to the panel.
Not a problem. Pleasure is all ours. And without making or taking any much more longer, I would like to ask Jess Scully to give us a brief sort of explanation of what council does and basically all the information that you wanted to share today.
Thanks, Rahim. So, look, in Australia, as you know, and as many of the international students listening would know, we have 3 tiers of a government system. Basically, we have a federal, state, and local government. So the local government section, which is the part that I'm involved in, we're broken up into small local council areas across the country. And we're kind of seen as the sort of front door of government. We're the first contact a lot of people have with government, because we take care of public space, we take care of community spaces, places like libraries and community centres, facilities like parks and swimming centres, for example, that we look after and that a lot of people listening probably enjoy and use. We take care of the streets and the public realm. And so traditionally we haven't been most local government areas, I should say, aren't that involved directly with international students. But the City of Sydney is different. And I think probably the City of Melbourne is a bit different as well, because we're the capital, the heart of the capital city of the state. And we're home to so many important teaching institutions like Sydney University, parts of the University of New South Wales, Notre Dame, UTS. All of these big institutions are here in the centre of the city. We have more international students who are resident here. We usually have about 25,000 international students who are resident in our small local government area. And they're so important to us. The Lord Mayor, Clover Moore, always says that the parents of the world have entrusted their children to us. And so we feel that we have a responsibility to take care of those, even though most of you are adults, of course, and don't need to be taken care of, but we have that responsibility. We're your hosts, and we really feel that very, very strongly. So the City of Sydney is a bit different. We have an international student liaison and advisory panel. We have relationships with all of the universities to make sure that we collaborate on lots of things, including discussions about international students. And we are also responsible for planning regulations around things like housing that a lot of international students live in. So in that way, we're a bit different. And in that way, there's some of the ways that we have contact with international students. But at the time of this crisis, we haven't been as involved in that process of securing or having the power to secure the kind of financial support that I think international students need at the moment due to the COVID crisis. But we are advocating on their behalf, and we do think it's really important that all of Australia and all of our levels of government take on the same level of responsibility that we feel for those people that we are host to, by the fact that we welcome you in as students in good times, and the fact that you provide such an important part of our economy in terms of the work that you all do, and the volunteering that you do, and the support that you provide as well. So, there's so much more to say, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much, Jess. And I think so. Whatever you have said is absolutely that I've witnessed myself as well. It's amazing that the projects that City is doing for international students, including the International Student Ambassador Program, and then other than that, the Sydney Ambassador Program, and many other things that the city is doing for international students. It's absolutely amazing. And at this point, I would like to ask Devendra to sort of share his information from Melbourne, from Victoria, and how is basically study Melbourne and the students in Victoria helping and facing these things?
So my work at CAPA, which is the peak national body for all the Australian postgraduates across the country, it more or less belongs to the research part where we can research and advocate for the rights of the students. Because of this crisis, we have moved towards the engagement part very well, and it has been very well received by the associations who are part of CAPA. So CAPA closely monitors the research done by the University of Australia or the campaigns which are going across Australia, and then depending on the nationwide approach, we follow the same and we take that thing forward. Uh, During the crisis, we have presented multiple campaigns. We have been speaking to multiple ministers regarding the issue, both from Labour and Liberal, both from the Labour and Liberal Party. And from what I have seen, just a month back, we had a list of demands which have been half met by now. Most of the state governments have issued their financial packages. Federal haven't issued anything as of now, but again, the help issued from the state governments has been commendable. I would also like to support the efforts made by the study clusters across the country. So be it Study Melbourne, Study Sydney, or the smaller ones of Study Queensland, or maybe Study Gold Coast, they have done something in their own form. Because I can totally understand what Jess conveyed, that they don't have the financial things in place and they don't have that capacity or capability to issue financial packages. But again, the things that they are already doing, like supporting international students by providing them the relevant information, or directing them to the relevant organizations, that's something I think that it's pretty much something which should be commended by every other international student who is living or who has made Australia his or her second home. uh, I think it will totally depend now how things will roll out in future, as Prime Minister Scott Morrison just conveyed that he will be rolling out a three-stage formula where he will be inviting the international students back to the country from the July intake itself. So I somewhere feel like the situation will normalize pretty soon, and we will be able to go out in the winds quite soon.
Cool. Thank you so much, Devendra, for sharing that information. And absolutely, it is the work of all the organizations that everyone is working together in these difficult times. And I believe that that is the only way that we all can sort of go through the situation and help each other and build more stronger communities within our states as well. And with with being said that, what we will do is that we will sort of take our session towards a QA session. So I will be asking a few questions that were sent to us by international students. So we reached out to a couple of students. We asked them that what were the things that you wanted to ask to the panelists from Devendra and Jess. So the first question that is for Jess is that, Jess, if you can just tell us that when the whole the coronavirus situation broke out, and so what were the initial measures taken by the city to ensure that the public safety?
Look, I think it was something that we could see happening around the world, but we didn't realize how soon it would be on our shores. But when it started, as you might recall, it all sort of advanced very, very quickly. So I remember from one week to the next, we basically loosened up once the changes came into effect, and for example that cafes and restaurants weren't able to trade, that bars and clubs and pubs had to close. We very, very quickly changed the regulations so that people could space out their seating, for example, for a cafe, so people could use more of the footpath. We realized that people were going to have some challenges getting in and around the city, so we paused the fines and that sort of thing to make it easier for people to get around. So the first step was about changing our regulations to make it easier for businesses to adapt to a new way of trading. And then we also had a significant stimulus package or a relief package really that we put together, where we had a whole bunch of fees and charges that we were waiving. So in all of the instances where we are the landlord, we told our tenants, if you can't pay rent, if you've had reduced income, we will negotiate with you to reduce your income, to reduce your rent. We realised that a lot of people are going to have trouble accessing food and being able to pay for food. So we made a grant of $1 million to Oz Harvest, which is an organisation that takes food that might go to waste and makes delicious meals and then distributes that food to people who might need food. So we think food security is a really key way that we can help a whole lot of people who have lost income, people who, like international students who might not be able to go out and work at the moment or to study in the way that they were before. And the other thing that we did is we created a whole bunch of new grants, and we've received a very, very strong response to those. These were grants for small businesses, for community organisations, and also for creative practitioners and artists in particular, like international students. They've been left out of a lot of the stimulus packages or support packages from the federal government and from the state government. So we wanted to create a pathway for people to apply. And one thing that we increased the funding to those grant programs by $8.5 million. And one thing that I've had a few conversations with people about is you don't have to be an Australian, or you didn't have to be an Australian citizen to apply for some of that funding, or a resident. So there were people who were running businesses in the city of Sydney who said, look, I'm not eligible for any support, but they were actually eligible for support through our grant program. So that's something I'm very proud of. And then my office directly, we reached out to about 1,000 businesses, and we just wanted to let people know that we were thinking of them, that we wanted to know what their particular challenges were, particularly industries like hotels, for example, that just are not trading at the moment. And we wanted them to know that they could access that support and they could talk to us if they felt like they were falling through the cracks. So that's, I mean, there's so much that needs to be done, but there were also some changes that have been harder. For example, we've closed access to a lot of recreational facilities like the aquatic centres, the parks and some playgrounds and exercise equipment. But we also have brought forward a lot of capital work so we can improve some of the public spaces that we have and that are being used more than ever. So there's a lot going on, but that was definitely the first step.
No, thank you so much for that. And I think so the first step is such a bigger step. I'm so curious about how the next steps will go forward. It's amazing to see that, like I was myself aware of the work that City was doing, but it is just that not all the information was out there and not everything people know. It's amazing to see that there's so much work that the city of Sydney is doing. And with regards of that, specifically about for international students, this question will be for Devendra. Devendra, can you sort of tell us how this virus situation has sort of impacted specifically international students? What were the impacts of this crisis?
So when you speak about the impact has been in two forms. One is the jobs of international students, the other one is studies. Obviously, both of them, because universities are closed, the job locations or the businesses are closed. So international students were sort of getting advantage in terms of studies and experience, and now they are not doing anything at all. Plus, they are not receiving any, there are a lot of students who are not receiving any financial benefits back from their home country. They are living or they are having jobs here to, continue their living here or to just carry on the rental expenses or the food and lodging expenses here. Somewhere I have met multiple students online or in the virtual meetings, and what they have conveyed me is it's really hard for them to be here when there are no classes. They can obviously study in that online environment from their home countries, so there's no real benefit of staying here. Plus, when they have left their jobs or when they are not having enough like when they are not having enough jobs, because only the people who are in supermarkets or who are in healthcare industries are working. So they are not left with any other option other than returning back to their countries. But because the Australian borders as well as the borders of several other countries are totally closed, they can't have that option as well. So it's more or less like they are just sitting here in their rooms studying online, which they do at their home countries as well, and not doing anything else. So my message to them is like, just stay calm, but again, how much time the entire situation will take on, or how much time we will take on to control the situation or to roll the things back again, the normal scenario when the universities were in full motion. That was the actual time when students have enjoyed here. International students basically come here to have that experience of studying in a foreign country, studying in a top ranked university. But now both of the options are totally diluted. So they are pretty much stressed. But again, the help and support issued by, I won't say that government has issued the support initially, but now when you see today, there have been financial packages, there have been support services from universities, from study clusters, from student associations. That has been a lot if you compare the same to 2 years back or 3 years back, when there were not much things issued by any of them for international students. So somewhere they are okay in the situation, but again they are still stressed that how they will cope up with sort of future few weeks or few months if the situation remains on till a later date.
That's good. And with that, like as you have mentioned that there are different packages that the councils have sort of recommended the government as well. So what we need, what I wanted to know is that, like, in what ways the student organizations and the non-for-profit organizations are assisting international students. Like, for example, as you mentioned that you guys are advocating on the behalf of international students, which is an amazing job that you guys are doing. But like in regards of what sort of physical help, or what sort of for example, maybe legal services, or any other financial services, is there anything that the organizations can provide or can support for international students?
So when you speak about just financial packages, they are issued by governments and are coordinated or moderated by the study clusters. The help coming from student associations, that's totally separate of it, and it more or less it comes from the university. So whatever packages are issued by the universities specifically, they are directed in the form of information to the students. Other than this, when you talk about the legal help, or when you talk about the help regarding some sort of academic integrity or those kind of help, obviously student associations have increased their resources to deal with the increased number of complaints, increased number of calls and messages and emails. I generally feel like there are student associations, not all, but there are still a few who are totally involved in disseminating the financial packages given by the universities as well. So all in all, they have increased their resources, but uh, like like the situation of study clusters, it's same with the student associations. They don't have real hand in issuing financial packages or issuing funds to the students. So they can only do a bit. Most of it is related to the information dissemination. Some part of it is related to providing legal help, or providing counseling to the students who are affected by COVID, or talking to their landlords if there is something going on, like some quarrel or something going on with the renter and the landlord. So these are the kind of things the students associations are doing, and in the last like 1 month, complaints have increased a lot. And even earlier, we didn't used to get complaints, but now we are also having calls and messages and emails on day-to-day basis from the students who are like, the student associations are not able to handle that much number of requests. So if you can do anything, and we again have to divert them to their student association, because their situation is known by their student association better than us. So it will be them who can help them better than someone who is a sort of stranger for the university. not really a stranger, but again, it's like, someone who is coming out from the university and speaking to the university rather than someone who is already based in the university.
No, I completely agree on that point as well. And yeah, thank you so much for the information that you just sort of mentioned there. And uh, yes, definitely, I believe that the student councils are working within their universities. It's just that, that students need to reach out to them, because not everything is available. Like, everything is available, but it's the matter of time that when you go and you reach out to the service centers, your student services, which can provide you more details on what sort of help is available. And at that point, we have also seen that in many occasions that, the communities and the people in their community are helping each other, especially in city of Sydney, as just mentioned as well, the project of Oz Harvest, and I volunteered there myself as well, so I know how the things run, and it's an amazing marketplace. I think so. I believe that's the only marketplace the Oz Harvest have in Sydney. That's the only one across Australia. I think so. And other than that, we also saw that the Edison project gave out the free food to international students, which was prepared food, and you just need to take it, and it was ready to eat. And other than that, many other organizations, there was Turbans for Australia, there was that organization who gave free food as well. So many things we can see that the community is working together, and the non-for-profit organizations as well. So just what would you say that how are people assisting their neighbors, friends, and family members within the city?
Look, I think there's lots of different ways. There have been a few restaurants that have done some really been very, very generous, and that they have been preparing meals and giving them away to anyone who needs them. So there's a restaurant called Colombo Social that have been doing that, and there's also a Thai place in Haymarket. There's the Palace Hotel in Haymarket as well. Places that benefit in the good times from having a lot of international students come in and hang out there and buy food there, and they've been giving back at this time, so that's really wonderful. And then also there's a lot of businesses that I've been talking to who say, look, we're basically staying open so that we can have that, those baristas have one day each work, for example. So I've met a few business owners who are doing that. But there are a lot of businesses who just don't have enough activity to even put those people on or keep them on. Particularly, it's those businesses like hospitality, hotels, even childcare and elder care services, where they have been really devastated to find that support structures like the JobKeeper payment, for example, which is supposed to be used by a business to keep their operations going, can't be paid to international students or to temporary workers, guest workers. And that, I think, is really short-sighted, unfortunately, by the government, because we need these workers to keep our economy functioning, and also we have an obligation, I think, and a responsibility to people who have come to Australia to contribute and to learn, and they do such important work in the good times, and we have a responsibility to them, I think, in the hard times as well. And it's something that I'm really hopeful that the New South Wales government will address, because it's where there has been support, it's been happening on a state-by-state basis, and some other states have really come to the party. So I'm really hopeful still that the New South Wales government will see that that's an opportunity and to make an impact in people's lives, and also ensure that Australia can maintain a good reputation as a place that you would want to study in the future. I think it's just an investment in our own future as a country, as an educator, to make sure that we're being a good host now. But businesses and individual businesses and community organisations have been very generous and very thoughtful and helpful. But I think we need something a bit more structural and a bit more widespread.
No, 100%. Yep. We have seen that, the other states like Victoria and I believe South Australia, these states have basically introduced some kind of welfare payments for students. So it's one-off payments or different sort of things financially helping them. But at this stage, New South Wales is still lacking in that sort of area that they would need to sort of work on. But what Study New South Wales has done recently is that they have created a international student hub. So through that portal, they're providing many different services. For example, emergency food assistance. If anyone needs help with accommodation or housing, they need help with mental health well-being, or they're also providing free legal services for international students. So it's like that sort of student hub is something that New South Wales has done for students, and I believe that in coming days we would be sort of looking at maybe a possibly some sort of financial help that would be available to international students as well. And yep, and as we have seen that now, I would like to touch another question that sort of came from one of the students as well. It was that in the recent news that we have saw that there were few students that were physically abused in CBD, and we heard that there were people saying that you are using different abusive words. For example, they were saying you are a Chinese virus, and you guys bring virus with you, things like that. And similarly, many students with specifically Asian and European background have had to face the discrimination or the racism in the public. So just what do you think that how can we sort of educate people on this matter?
Look, it's so disappointing, and it's really shocking. It's upsetting, and it's really silly and short-sighted, because Australia is a nation that is comprised of so many migrants. We're all migrants. Up from our First Nations people in Australia, we're all migrants here. So it's really disgusting that we're seeing this, and it's really upsetting as well that Asian Australians and people from Asian backgrounds are being unfairly targeted. And I know the Asian Australian Alliance have recorded and have been documenting instances of these kinds of attacks, and they documented 178 attacks like this in just 2 weeks in April. And even before the lockdown restrictions and happened here in late March, we saw a contraction from the end of January in the number of people who were going out in Chinatown, for example, and were visiting Asian Australian businesses. And so, unfortunately, for a lot of Asian Australian businesses, they've been feeling the downturn for almost the whole year, which is going to make it so hard for them to bounce back. It's really it's a deep-seated cultural issue. But what we genuinely need is leadership that reinforces the fact that Australia is a multicultural nation, and that our success depends on being a place that people feel safe and embraced and appreciated for what they bring and the diversity that they bring to this country. And the other thing that we need is a simplification of our anti-discrimination laws. And the Greens Senator Marine Faruqi has called for our anti-discrimination laws to be simplified and strengthened so that people can understand them and use them. I think most people wouldn't even think that to use them or to go through a legal or a police process. You'd just think, oh, I'm going to keep my head down and I'll just get through it and not attract any more attention to myself. But if there's a way of stopping this, I think it's about making sure that there are consequences to actions that are racist actions and that are making people feel unsafe in the place that they live. So we need to make it simpler for people to report racism to police or to the Australian Human Rights Commission, and make sure that it's not intimidating or hard to access. We need a much broader anti-racism strategy And we need actually an education campaign that makes sure that we're not scapegoating one part of our community over, over something like this, which is beyond everybody's control. It's so upsetting, and I'm very sorry to anyone who's experiencing that in Sydney. And I hope we can work with you. There's a whole bunch of different projects going on of people coming together and saying, this has to stop. So I hope that we can start to make a shift in this by making it really visible and hopefully changing the laws so that it's easier to take action on this.
Yes, no, thank you so much for that as well. Now, I completely, what we have seen in the recent days as well, as you mentioned, the Marine Faruqi as well, that they have been some changes and, different leaders have sort of advocated on that matter and said that, we need to change policies, we need to make some amendments and changes to ensure the safety of everyone basically living in Australia as well. And coming back to Devendra, as we know that at this stage, there is no immunity to this virus. There is no vaccine. There's no treatment. So, I mean, like, what is your opinion, like, on the international travel for the students? Like, should they, like, I know that there is very few number of flights that are available, but should they consider to travel at this stage, or just wait until the things get better and then make a safe decision for themselves as well and for the other people? So what's your opinion on that?
So what I'm saying is, I think for everyone, firstly, we should contain the virus, and then we should move on to any other thing, be it domestic travel, be it international travel. Coming to international travel, I think that's one of the major reasons because of which the virus has been gone global. And that is the only thing which we can do to sort of stop it getting spread in more countries. So, I mean, if we can stop the entire exercise of getting international students in the next few months or weeks, we can sort of contain this virus at a much better stage. If you have seen the records from Western Australia or South Australia was sort of good on containing the virus. Last 14 days have been fine, but I think 2 days before there was another sort of patient who was having COVID positive. And the same is true with Western Australia. They have been containing the virus and they are pretty good going from the last 7 days. But who knows the future? So it's like, if we can contain the virus fully before committing to any sort of international travel, be it for the international students, I can understand that universities are going into a huge amount of loss. Government is also looking towards its loss, and we can't sort of have that burden of having another loss when we just dealt with the bushfires in Queensland and parts of New South Wales and parts of Victoria. I believe if we just go ahead with international travel, it might spread on major area with majority of the population, which is not good for the future. So we just can contain the virus first, and then we can look for international travel, or then we can look for engagement from international students or the people who want to study in Australia. Then we can look for those things.
Okay, now thank you so much for your opinion on that. Sort of, if students should travel or not. And like, speaking in general, like we see that the councils are working, the government is trying their best, the study clusters are trying their best to support students in any way possible. Do you think the student councils in general are doing enough for international students? Like, what do you think what should be the role of student leaders? Like, we can see that many political leaders coming together, many local leaders coming together to support international students. So what do you think should be the role of student leaders within their universities, within their community? How should they sort of, support?
The student associations and unions and the peak bodies are all doing good enough as of now. There's no, nothing is enough if you keep on doing it for a longer period of time. So depending on the situation, depending on how much support we are getting, we'll keep advocating for the rights of the students. No matter how I mean, how much we do, it's always marked as less, because obviously we have more expectations from ourselves, and then students also have more expectations from us as the student leaders. But if you see the numbers, they probably speak for themselves. As compared to last 2 years or 3 years, the student associations, councils, speak bodies have engaged more in the last 2 months or 3 months with sort of all the like all the political leaders across the country, all the clusters. Like they have really come together, and the sort of hashtag, I should say in this together, has really been practical in this crisis time. I can still say that we still need to do a lot uh, compared to what we are doing right now. But the current work which we have already done is far more than what we have done in the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, no, it's amazing. And as we see that, the times are changing and everything is also changing with the border restrictions and the difficulties. And as we were talking about going back home, we were able to see that just one way ticket, if you're even going back to any Asian country, for example Pakistan, you have to pay $3,000 for just one way ticket. And in normal days it's about $1,200, from 800 to $1,200. It really varies around that sort of value. But at this time, it's like super expensive for anyone to go back. So, I would like to ask you that, in your opinion, what do you think that how much time Australia may take to reopen its border? As we have recently seen that the Prime Minister was saying that in the stage 3, he will be looking forward for international students, that there might be a exemption for them to come back. But even if that's the case, many international students are unable to catch the flight back and facing these difficulties. So, what is your opinion on that?
Look, I wish I knew when that might happen. I think in one sense it's been a really positive development, the way that the Australian economy has evolved somewhat towards being purely about extraction of resources from the ground, and is shifting towards being a knowledge and education economy. I think that's where we should be. That should be a strength that we're developing, and something that we should be developing, of course, as well, are our relationships with young people from all over the world. And if we do international education correctly, in a way that is respectful and generous and well supported, then I think it's an absolutely important part of Australia's future. But to get back to that, to get back to the way things were, I think shouldn't be anybody's goal. I think the goal should be to use this pause in the way that many have described it as a great pause, an opportunity for us to reassess our dominant economic and social system that really wasn't working for that many people anyway, and to look at it as a way to redesign our international education relationship with the people we invite here to study, and to understand that we are dependent on international students who, because the federal government has defunded our university education so much of our university funding is dependent on international students. And yet, as we've seen, there have been very poor outcomes for a lot of students, and a lot of people feeling exploited, or feeling that they're paying too much, feeling that they're paying too much for substandard housing, feeling that they're not being potentially exploited in their workplaces as well. We need to actually use this moment to renegotiate the deal that we give international students, and make sure that we are treating them respectfully, and that we have, through this pause, appreciated the role that they play in our broader society. I've spoken to so many businesses that don't function without international students working there. I've spoken to so many businesses that don't function without international students coming and spending money there, in their, late at night or after work or whatever. We depend on international students so much, and yet they're quite often used as a sort of punching bag in our society, or used as a cash cow in our society as well. We should not be racing back to that. that is actually a flawed and exploitative model. And we actually need to just pause and have a better deal for international students. Look, that is a big aspirational thinking, but I really hope that our universities and all of the institutions who engage with international students are thinking about how they can deliver a better quality experience, and how they can have a more supported relationship with the people who come here to study, not just as economic units, but as important contributors to the educational experience and to our society. So you know what, look, I know a lot of universities want people to be back here for the next semester. I think actually we should have a more substantial look at the way that international student education is run in this country, and we should think, well, what safeguards are there in place for the next crisis that comes along, where people can't go home, and where people have to stay here and don't have any support.
No, yeah, I completely agree with that as well. As we all know that, I think so. The international education industry is the third largest industry in Australia. And with that being said, I was recently looking. I was just changing my home, so I was looking for another apartment to rent. So when I went out there, it is that the real estate industry has been impacted so badly that if you go there, every house is like, if it was listed for $1,000, it's now 500, and everything has been affected. And as it's just that one point of industry that we are looking at this stage. But if you go in other sectors, it's same as well. Like everything has been impacted, and as you have mentioned as well, that the times are changing and we need to adopt as well with that sort of, the new environment that we are looking at. Because until unless we find a treatment or a vaccine for this virus, the situation could stay same as what it is now. So I definitely agree on that point, and that we all need to adopt. We need to renegotiate, and even the universities. The universities should sort of support students, and allow them to sort of minimize or reduce the international tuition fees, because what the international students have paid for was basically face-to-face classes, using the facilities, using the internet, many things that the students were using there. But due to the situation, they are at home and are unable to use those things. Even for myself as well, I didn't have an internet connection at my home, so I always used to go to uni and use the Wi-Fi and everything. But with the changing situation, the tuition fees remains the same, and on the top of that, now I have to get a internet service at my home, which will cost separately. And just like that, all the things and all the extra expenses comes together, which shouldn't be there as well. And yeah, I think that universities should sort of start working on that point, because it is very crucial for them as well, for their future students. If they support students at this time, so in coming years, obviously students will be looking towards them as well. So that is a important point that sort of we needed to be discussing there. And coming back to Devendra, can you please give us some information on health services? I mean that there are many students who don't know that how they can access these services, and some people think that you have to pay for the test, the COVID-19 test. If you need to go for a test, you have to pay. I'm not sure about Victoria, but in New South Wales, it's free test. Anyone can go in and you can basically get the test done. So what is the situation in Victoria, and specifically for international students? Because every international student does have an insurance, but how does that work?
So the situation is sort of similar for all international students and temporary residents. The insurance providers don't cover corona crisis or any other this kind of crisis against their insurance package. So what the state governments have done, there are like there are packages, there are support issued by separately by state government. So for Victoria, I can say that they, as you said, that the treatment, testing is totally free. The treatment along with that in the public facilities is also free in Victoria. So the students generally don't know about such things. This is publicized by study clusters. This is mentioned on the department's websites, but generally the students don't focus on such things. The students have, I mean, somewhere I have felt this thing that students generally focus on the financial part, rather they have to focus on the health part first. Financials can come later. It's their health which is most important for them, for their families, and for their like for obviously for the government as well. But again, it's first priority, whether that's government or their families. Their health is the first priority. Afterwards, it comes about the finances or their living arrangements. Coming to as you said, like New South Wales, the treatment is I should say the testing is totally free. But again, it totally differs how the New South Wales government is taking this issue in consideration. Victoria has totally made everything free related to COVID, which includes any sort of treatment in the public facilities, or if you're visiting your what they call it, like doctors or GPs, just for the purpose of coronavirus, that's free as well. If you speak about other states, they have made their own arrangements. Like if you speak about South Australia, they have really good arrangements in terms of health. That's the way they have tackled this situation in the last 2 weeks, which is really commendable. So, I mean, if the students can focus on looking at the resources available or the support available on the department's website, or even if they can, just like a few pages of the department and of the study clusters, they will get the real information within their mobile devices. They have to just seek the information which they really want to have.
Yes, yes. And but sometimes what we have seen is that obviously there is a very large number of students in Australia. So there was a point at when there were services available, students did went there, but what happened was them half of them were returned back, and because there were not enough services there. And with that being said, also that the students when they come to Australia, as the Prime Minister mentioned as well, that he said that every student who comes to Australia has to give sufficient proof that they can afford themselves for the first year of their study. So, what do you think? What's your remarks on that? Because we can see that the situation has changed. Obviously, it's just not Australia that has been impacted. Every country across the globe has the same situation. For example, if my parents are in Pakistan, they are having the same issues. The whole country is locked down. They are not working. The economy and everything is going down. So, what would be your remarks on that?
I think the comment made by the leader of the country is somewhere against the culture of this country, which is quite multicultural and acceptable to all sorts of people, to cultures, to religions, to countries. As Jess already mentioned, that this is a country built on multiculturalism and built on the education industry, or the people who come here as students and then connect themselves to this particular country. I should say that if you are somewhere looking at the comments made from the leader of the country, then there are several other people, several other leaders, or several other politicians who have made some really good comments on the international students. I would have read out them to you, but obviously they are not on paper with me right now. But somewhere they rolled around these things, that international students are our friends, our families, and our neighbors. They should be really supported in these crisis times. And this is not just one person doing like saying something like this. It has came from multiple leaders, including Green Senator Marian Faruqi. There are several other senators from New South Wales, from Tasmania, from Victoria, from South Australia, which I have seen on which I'm seeing on day-to-day basis. I'm somewhere communicating with them day-to-day basis, and this is a real feeling that they really want the country to be more open, and any sort of harsh comments against someone on the basis of their nationality or on the basis of their race, as you earlier spoke, that's sort of unacceptable in this country, and I really don't support such statements.
Okay, Nana, thank you so much for your comment on that. And coming back to Jess and looking at the time as well. So, do you just what do you think that as we all know that the international students contribute to the economy of Australia, and they are the part of the working industry, and they work in almost every sector that is in Australia. So, do you think that the international students should be eligible or should be given the job keepers payment?
Absolutely. I mean, I think they should at least be able to apply for job seeker or a version of that, and perhaps job keeper is the best one because it would help those people who are working as casuals potentially or who are employed at different businesses to be supported, because clearly they've been working, they need the income, they're contributing, and they should be supported in return. And the thing is, they pay tax in this country.
Yeah.
Right. So at the very least, they should be given a refund now of all the tax that they have paid in the country. For example, there's got to be a way to compensate and support people who are working and contributing here. And if you're here as an international student, I think it's very unlikely that you're not working in some capacity. So people need to be supported to continue to have an income when they're not generating any income. It's actually just the moral and humane thing to do. People need to have a roof over their heads and to eat. And it's also the economically smart thing to do, because people will keep spending money in the economy and supporting other businesses. And it's the smart thing to do in the long term for the Australian economy if we are going to continue to have education as one of the new pillars of the economy. So it makes sense on every level. It's a real shame, I think, that the federal government has kind of dug in their heels on it. But I'm hopeful that the New South Wales government will step up like the other states have done. It just has to happen, I think.
Mm-hmm. And then speaking of economy, the second largest industry is tourism. And I myself volunteered with the City of Sydney with the visitor services. So, like, we see a large influx of international people, international tourists coming from overseas to visit and to basically enjoy Australia. So, I mean, like, what are the speculations for the Australian economy, and like how that whole thing affects the workplaces, the jobs in the future? I mean, how would they affect the future employment industry?
Look, I think that's going to be a next big challenge is the most hopeful sign, I think, is this idea of the bubble, the trans-Tasman bubble that they've been talking about this week, this idea that we might have a little area that's New Zealand and Australia where it's more or less controlled and we can travel between the two countries. And then I imagine we'll see other countries that have successfully managed their outbreaks, places like South Korea or Taiwan, for example, that have had very, very strong responses to the outbreak. Maybe we can extend the bubble to those places. And I think it's going to be domestic tourism for a long time. Hopefully people have enough money to go out and have holidays. And then also more limited international tourism. But it's going to be almost like a return to the steamer boat travel era, where we have a much more limited palette of travel options. And I think, you know what, people are creative and inventive, and the tourism industry is one that I think has adapted to different changes and challenges. So I'm hopeful that people will find a way to make it work.
Okay, no. All right, so just looking at time that we have very few minutes available and left for us. So just before we go to its conclusion, just what would be your one message to the audience? What would you like to say to them?
I'd like to say I'm sorry if you haven't felt supported, but as Devendra has said, and as you said as well, Rahim, that there are places like the Hub, there are forms of support that are out there. please get in touch with me if you're in Sydney and you need to be pointed to some sources of support or food or advocacy groups who are doing work on your behalf. This isn't my area of expertise, but this is the area, the place that I know, and I hope that I can direct you to some sources of support if you need it. My message is that you are needed and appreciated and welcomed, and I feel that we have a responsibility to you, and I hope we can help you get through this, and that we give you a reason to think of Australia fondly now and in the future, and I hope that we can take care of you and know that you're appreciated. I think people will miss you and miss the contribution that international students make. So yes, I just want people to know that.
Thank you, Jess. And Devendra, what would be your one message to the audience today?
Well, there is firstly one strong advice that all the international students should register themselves on their respective consulates or embassies, because embassies are extending some help and they are disseminating the information, but they don't really have data of the international students who are studying in the country. So this is the first thing they should do. If they're watching it live right now, they should do it right away. The message which I want to share is like, stay patient, keep calm, and be positive during these times, because this is just a small duration of time which will just pass like other days. And you will be back in the winds and you'll be back in your universities and you will enjoy the culture of Australia, a multicultural environment without those comments which were earlier said by the leaders. People are really welcoming here, and obviously, as Jess said, that we are built on the multiculturalism totally. So yeah, I think you should remain positive amid these times. That's all I should say right now.
Thank you, Devendra, for your message as well. And on that note, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our audience tonight for joining us, and hope this session was helpful, informative, and also a massive thank you to our panelists, Jess and Devendra, for sharing their views and important information. All of you take time out, taking your time out of your busy and personal schedule. It really shows that how much you're willing to support international students, and it sends a clear message to the international community that we all are in this together. And on that note, this session comes to an end, and I wish you all the very best. Stay safe and stay at home. Thank you.